We spoke last time about Hinduism, and today I wanted to get into Buddhism, but as a particularly good contrast with a major element of Buddhism, namely its rejection of ritual in the early days, I'd like to just say one other thing about one of the types of Hinduism that I just cannot in good conscience pass by, and that is what is called Mimamsa Hinduism, or I suppose the full name is Purva Mimamsa Hinduism, which means old worship Hinduism. It was founded, or at least formulated definitively, by a man named Jainini. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but that's the best I can figure out. At least I'm not adding cricket onto the end of it. But it's Jaimini. And remember I said how the rituals were in a sense more important than the gods, and that made the priests more important than the gods. Any rationalist would have to suspect that in any religion the gods really are just the tall shadows of the priests. But here is a religion that, as time went by and theological thought continued, somebody made that connection and added two and two. And they did say, well, are the gods merely middlemen for the effectiveness of the rituals to gain the ends we desire in prayer? Is the real power in the ritual rather than in the gods? I mean, that seems implicit if the gods are nourished and energized, if at all, by the ritual sacrifices, and not by any particular meat or grain or anything, since it's not so much that, it's more like transubstantiation. There is an occult or hidden power in that, the sacrificial materials that is offered. That is what makes the world go round. Well, what's the upshot going to be? A kind of a demythologized ritual religion in which there are no gods. The Mimamsa school says of Indra, Vishnu, and all the rest, what most non-fundamentalist Christians would say about Adam and Eve. No, of course, they're just allegorical ciphers. They're some kind of symbols. Perhaps, as Don Cupid and some of the non-realist theologians today in Christianity would say, the gods are merely functions of the worship, as numbers are for math. Well, at any rate, Mimamsa Hinduism is technically atheistic, but highly ritualistic. And indeed, ritual is the whole darn thing. That is what unleashes the Brahman, understood as the sacred force that runs all things. Well, priests can manipulate it. And I just, all kinds of questions arise from this. The Vedas are, in effect, the Word of God, even though there aren't any gods, so how does that work? Oh, they're not stupid, they thought of that. They said the Veda, all the truth, the wisdom, however you want to translate it, even in the form of articulated, specified words, always existed, inscribed on eternity, you might say. If you want to bring in the Akashic records, go ahead. It's always been there, and indeed it would have to be there, for the simple fact that one cannot create truth. One merely discovers truth. Truth has to be there already. And so it's not like some authority writes something down, and on their authority it becomes true. Well, it's not true at all. That kind of mischief has given rise to voluntarism in ethics, that murder is wrong only insofar as God says so, and if he changes his mind tomorrow, which he might, then it will be all right to murder. What is that? That's a way of saying nothing is inherently right or wrong. God's just got the baseball and the bat, so he makes the rules. That's the same with that ridiculous presuppositionalist theory that some Calvinists have, though certainly no Calvinists need it. It's not integral to their system. But the idea that logic only works because it's founded on the divine fiat, well, in that case, just vitiating logic depends upon a whim. It is not prior to the one who promotes it. Well, in the same way, they'd say the Vedas were simply there in the cosmos, and there were some people, the ancient sages, who had switched on what they call the inner apperceiver, some witness of the spirit, if you prefer, that put them in touch with the Veda and enabled them to write it down. So yeah, there were human authors, but as with any traditional inspiration claim, the authors were really penmen, stenographers. But there are no gods who could have dictated it. So it's a pretty well thought out system, and needless to say, there's much more to it, but that might be all you'd remember anyway, and so let's leave it at that. But this is exactly the opposite approach we're going to see when another mutation from the Vedic religion occurs, namely Buddhism, where you also have at least an indifference to the gods, if not an outright denial, but the rituals are the last thing you need, so they are summarily dumped along with the supposedly inspired scriptures. We'll see why that is very shortly. Now, what about Buddhism? When did it begin? You might think we would know at least that, and most people think we do, but I like to be just the village skeptic here and make trouble even over that one. Let me tell you why. Now, supposedly, at least in the West, the most commonly quoted date for the founder of this religion, the Buddha, had various other names. We'll list them in a moment. The Buddha would have been born in Kapilavastu, Nepal, in 563 BC or BCE. But there is controversy over that among Buddhists. Different Buddhist sources have different dates, different years, and so forth. So that's one thing that lends a little bit of uncertainty. But there's a much bigger question as well. But who was this? Born, supposedly, in Kapilavastu, Nepal, in the 6th century BCE, very close to the time of the destruction of the Jerusalem temple. If it ever existed. Go read your Thomas L. Thompson on that one. Well, it's the one we call the Buddha, the Enlightened One. And you spell it B-U-D-D-H-A, I hope you know, at least you do now, not B-U-D-D-A-H like on Buddha records. I hope you realize that. I hope they realize that, and they figure they just couldn't get away with putting the copyright on a divine name. Who knows? But it should be B-U-D-D-H-A. You can call him just Buddha if you want. But technically it should be the Buddha, just as old Tillich always insisted we should speak of Jesus as the Christ. Well, yeah, really, it should be the Buddha here, a title. The Enlightened One, the Awakened One. Last time I mentioned the three gunas, the three modes in which matter exists. One of them was illuminated, conscious matter. How could there be such a thing? Well, I'm talking to it right now. You, right? You got a material brain that thinks material thoughts by shooting out those electrochemical signals, etc. Well, yes, even matter can be conscious. That is how, remember, you can have an ego or a jiva, a psychological self, but it is matter, not spirit. That would be something else, like an Atman, remember? So, all right. The word, though, for that kind of conscious matter is buddhi, B-U-D-D-H-I, as in shake your booty. Well, so the Buddha is the enlightened one, the awakened one. There's a story that Houston Smith tells in his great book, which used to be called the Religions of Man, but I guess they figured that that was biased, so they changed it to Religions of the World or something, and I think that's what it's called these days, but maybe it was the porpoises that were complaining. I don't know if they were left out. I don't know, but somebody came up to the Buddha, quite an impressive figure, and said, just what are you? Are you a god? Are you a man? What are you? What's the story? And supposedly said, I am one who woke up. I am the Buddha. I think that's kind of important. That's kind of profound. Don't you know? A lot of people, a lot of individuals, or indeed whole civilizations that might benefit from just plain snapping out of it. You know, people are cruising along every day watching idiotic sitcoms and, you know, letting their minds go with just the stupidest rumination on cultural cellulose that you can imagine. You feel like just shaking them and saying, wake up! And the Heideggerian call, well, suppose somebody did. Might be the founder of a religion. Now, who is it that has this title? Well, actually, this is one reason there is some ambiguity about when it began, because all Buddhists believe there were some 25 historical Buddhas stretching on backward into remote antiquity. Most scholars think, it probably began with a man named Siddhartha Gautama of the Shakya clan, an Aryan warrior clan, typical of those that were all over India in the wake of the Aryan invasion, that I mentioned last time in connection with the Upanishads, that strangely that kind of mysticism seems to have emerged not from the Brahmin priestly caste, though they shortly embraced it, but rather from the second caste, the Kshatriyas, who were the kings and warriors, and that there were a bunch of these Kshatriyas who decided to seek an alternate spiritual path. Well, according to the sacred legend, maybe it's a fact, Siddhartha Gautama of the Shakya clan was one of these, like the sages of the Upanishads, or like Vardhamana Mahavira, the founder of Jainism. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. Again, I guess what I'm trying to underline here is we Western critical scholars tend to dismiss the 24 previous Buddhas, like Amitabha Buddha, Manjushri Buddha, Dipankara Buddha, etc., as just fictive doublets of the historical founder. And I suppose the reason for that, the reason to have multiplied them on back into the ancient time, is to say, as I just did with Mimamsa Hinduism, that the truth can't be new. If it's that true, why is it this late and coming to light? Oh, there's actually another good reason for that, a very good reason in Buddhism. Apparently that everybody likes being asleep, so it might take quite a long time for someone to discover wakefulness. It might take some time for the alarm clock to go off and not be pitched through the window. But I suspect the idea is that no, this can't be lately discovered. That might indicate to someone that it was some Johnny-come-lately innovation, some new gimmick. And that, I would guess, is why they projected it backward, or a handy word that your spell check doesn't know, retrojected it. I love that. That's the idea. Western scholars say the first 24 Buddhas are fictive, and indeed the future Buddha Maitreya, who would be number 26, probably also fictive, despite there are a couple of guys around who claim that they are he. But we want a founder, so we say Gautama. All right, it really began with him. He didn't inherit the tradition. He started it off. When we say that, we are calling millions of Buddhists wrong, and they don't appreciate it much. If you think historical Jesus studies have created a stir, the same thing happened when it was suggested in Asia some time ago by critical scholars. We don't think the previous Buddhas existed. Oh, no, you don't. You bet they did, etc. It is not negotiable for many Buddhists, in fact, especially those who venerate Amitabha Buddha more than Gautama Buddha. They're not going to be told that he didn't exist. Now, I am not one of these super ecumenical people that say, well, we got to kowtow to everybody's prejudice. let the weaker brother rule the roost. No. I think, however, you can invert this and come up with an interesting suggestion. They're wrong, these believers. These first 24 Buddhas are no doubt fictitious characters, but maybe they are right in that there is no big difference between them and Gautama Buddha. It may be that he is no more historical than they are, and so that's where I tend to wonder if some few Western scholars of Buddhism in the 19th century, like Kern, I believe, were right in saying that the Buddha was originally some sort of a sun god, etc., or perhaps just a common name to hang early Buddhist teachings on, as another scholar suggested. You see what this means, that there might not have been a supposed beginning point, and that would mean that in general this legend of a sequence of 25 Buddhas, though literally fictive, might preserve the truth of an old tradition. This is all the more true since with Jainism, which I want to talk about after Buddhism, we have a very similar picture of Mahavira, the founder, and that there, in that case, had been 23 previous Jinnas, or victors, spiritual champions like him. But scholars do tend to think that Mahavira was not really a founder figure, but rather someone who gave the definitive formulation to a much earlier tradition. Well, you could say the same thing about the Buddha, that he was just reformulating an earlier tradition, or you could say that the Buddha and Mahavira are simply two more fictive exemplars of an old tradition, or of a new one. I mean, it might be a late invention. Who knows? It is difficult to say, and our desire to be able to say is not a piece of evidence on the scale. So, often people will, Christian apologists who want to defend and prove a historical Jesus who just happens to look exactly as he's portrayed in the Gospels, and only the canonical ones, they will point by contrast to Buddhist tradition and say, oh, come on now, with Buddhism, the supposed words of Buddha were not even written down until like 4 centuries after his ostensible lifetime. There's no guarantee of what he may have done or said. True. And they say, by contrast, the Gospels must be a lot earlier than that, even on the most radical reading. Well, that's true. The failure there, the error, is to assume that it would take 400 years for it to be distorted. It might not take nearly that long. Indeed, it does not. But there are constantly going to be arising questions about parallels between Buddhism and Christianity and how we study them. And one thing to keep in mind is the possibility that when you see similarities between the two, substantial ones, in their teachings, one may have influenced the other. And in each case, you have to ask, what direction would that influence have gone? Okay, so restricting ourselves for the moment to the ostensible historical founder, born perhaps in 563 BC. What do we know about him? Well, I want in a moment to divide this into legend and history, and let me recommend a book, E.J. Thomas's book, The Life of Buddha as Legend and History. It's just a superb book, though there are others that do the same sort of thing. Let's stick with this character first and just get our terminology straight. First, the names and titles. I've already used these, but let's just fill them in here. Siddhartha, Siddhartha. This would be the first name, the personal name, Prince Siddhartha. That is who Keanu Reeves plays so well in the historical flashback sequences on the movie Little Buddha, which is really a terrific flick. They really do a great job of dramatizing scenes from the Buddhist scriptures. So Prince Siddhartha, that means he whose goal is accomplished. Now that kind of sounds like a title, but a lot of names do if you break them down. Names usually mean something positive. Occasionally some cultures have negative meaning names as a way of warding off the attention of jealous spirits that might say, he whose aim is accomplished, eh? We'll just see about that. Names are a funny and fascinating thing, but at any rate, the personal name, Siddhartha, his family name, Gautama, you will see this spelled a couple of different ways. From the Pali, the language that he probably would have spoken, transliterated from that, it is Gotama, Gautama. But if you go to the Sanskrit, in which many Buddhist scriptures are written too, it's Gautama, almost the same thing, Gautama. It seems to me I see that one more often in the books. Take your pick, though, really. Now, you may be thinking about Siddhartha. Hold on a second. Hold on. I thought that was somebody else. I read Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha, and that's not him, right? Well, no, but for a good reason. There's this interesting thing in Siddhartha where this one man, the friend of the narrator, Siddhartha, meets the Buddha and hears him preach and decides to become a Buddhist monk, and then he brings news of this to his friend and says, you got to come hear this guy, he's great, and he does. And but he decides he's not going to become a monk and join the Sangha or the order. And his newly converted friend says, why not? I mean, you agree, he's terrific, right? Yes, I do, he says, but you see, what I learned from him was that I can't just follow in his path. If I get his point, I got to do what he did and strike out on my own path. And so for Hermann Hesse to call this character Siddhartha is sort of saying that he's his own Buddha and you have to be also. So there is a point to that. It is not a confusion, a very profound point to it. But it was a name a lot of people had, and he happened to have it. So Siddhartha Gautama. I say he is from the clan of the Shakyas, Sakya, or sometimes spelled with a C, but I don't think very much anymore. And because of this, he is called Shakyamuni, which means the sage of the Shakyas, the sage of the Shakya clan. Sakyamuni. Muni is a sage. You might see that component in other names too. But Shakyamuni, the sage of the Shakya clan. Another title that is used all over the place in Buddhist texts is the Tathagata. Tatha. Gatha. Let me go over that one more time. Tatha. The Tathagata. That seems to mean, if you break it down, the thus come one, which I take to mean something like the briefly manifested one. I think of the Gospel of John, the first chapter, where it says, the Logos was made flesh and tabernacled among us, literally. He pitched his tent among us. That's automatically, inherently, a temporary dwelling. He wasn't going to be there for long. And I get the impression there is something like that here, but it's hard to say, because I don't think we have any Buddhist scriptural passages where this word is used with an explanation. Remember, it is something like 4 centuries, and so if somebody ever needed an explanation, they took that for granted, and they don't bother explaining it to us. It functions kind of like the Son of Man in gospel sayings, in that the Buddha uses it of himself. I suppose you could read some of them as if he was talking about someone else, but I don't believe so. So the Tathagata. The next, because there is a next, there's a lot of titles, is the Jinnah, J-I-N-A. Didn't you just hear me talk about that in connection with another religion? Well, yes, you did. It means the victor, the winner, the conqueror, and it is the name for all 24 of the saviors of the Jaina or Jainist faith, named for these guys. But they didn't copyright it, they didn't coin it. You can call other people conquerors too, and for the same reason, because the Buddha is the one who conquered suffering, so naturally they're going to call him that as well, just like Asclepius was called the Savior, just like Jesus. Augustus was called the Savior. It doesn't belong to any particular religion any more than the word God does. Well, finally, and I'm sure there's some I'm forgetting, but of the titles usually encountered, there is the Bodhisattva. If you're a Steely Dan fan, and I hope you're among that august company, you know there's a song called Bodhisattva, a great one. I'm not quite sure what the connection is, but it's often difficult to interpret those songs. But it's B-O-D-H-I-S-A-T-T-V-A, the Bodhisattva. Literally, that means enlightenment being. It's one whose nature is enlightenment. But the connotation of the word, I hope I have that straight, well, maybe it's denotation. I don't remember the difference. Give me a break. It's been a long time since I taught logic. The way it's used is to mean the one on the way to becoming a Buddha. Now, you'll know already from what I said that this could apply to a lot of people, because their tradition is that there were 24 previous Buddhas, and since they weren't, any of them, automatically enlightened, there must have been a period of tutelage and journeymanship, or whatever the word is, where they learned how to become a Buddha, and during that time they must be called the Bodhisattvas. Same thing with Siddhartha Gautama. If you tell him the story and you haven't gotten up to the point where he becomes enlightened, you shouldn't speak of him as the Buddha. That's confusing. You should, as the old texts do, speak of him as the Bodhisattva. Yeah, he's the one. We know how the story's coming out. He's going to be the Buddha, but at this point, at this stage of the game, he's not yet. But you can see where it's heading, right? The course is clear, so let's call him the Bodhisattva. And there are living Bodhisattvas today. A couple of them, one of them you've probably seen on TV and read stuff by. The Dalai Lama, of course, is a great Bodhisattva on Earth. Though he might not tell you that. He tends to be evasive on that stuff and says, I'm just a Buddhist monk. That he's not fooling me. I know whoever this is, what do we know about him? Let me give you the core facts, if they are, about the historical Buddha, as most scholars would summarize them. And I want to reiterate, I am not a scholar of Buddhism. I love Buddhism. I have studied Buddhism a good bit, but I don't think I could call myself a scholar of Buddhism by any stretch of the imagination. I've read many books over many years about it, but I don't know Sanskrit, Pali, Tibetan, any of these things. There are plenty of Buddhist scriptures I have not even read in English translation, though I'm always trying to read more. So I don't want to gull you. I don't want this to be some sort of a swindle where I am claiming more credit than I deserve. No way. I don't want to be like Lobsang Rampa. I am just an interested student, and I know you are too, and so, again, I'm not giving you the last word, what a laugh that would be, but maybe a first word, just trying to whet the old appetite for getting into this yourself. Okay, so what do most scholars of Buddhism think, Western critical scholars? Well, again, you know, number one here, born in Kapilavastu, Nepal in 563 BC or BCE. Does that matter at all? Well, I guess it doesn't, but often one sees the Buddha depicted as like an Aryan with Western Caucasian features, and if you see him with Asian features, the extra skin flap over the eyelid and things like that, you think, well, that's somebody else, or that's the indigenization version of him, like a black Jesus in some churches. But no, if he was Nepalese, that implies he was an East Asian, which for no good reason intrigues me. I find it kind of interesting. I couldn't tell you why, but I did once I noticed, oh, from Nepal? Well, that's a little different than I had supposed. The Nepalese are big into Vajrayana Buddhism even today. Okay, he was supposedly, as I said, the member of the royal clan of the Shakyas, and thus he was a member of the Kshatriya caste, like Mahavira, the founder of Jainism, and like these sages of the Upanishads. And like them, he rejected the traditional Vedic religion of the Brahmin priests. And I guess if you were part of a general movement of rejecting, that would give you some culture, but some courage, to do it. You're not the only one walking the plank, but that does kind of seem like what you do in rejecting traditional views, sloughing off the security of the past. So you got to give people like this credit. And they figured that specifically he didn't just leave the religion, but like the sages of the forest, went out to meditate and came up with the doctrines of the Upanishads that Siddhartha had literally picked up and left his old life, that he had lived in at least relative opulence. Now, what would that mean? I can't tell you. They would have had slaves, I guess. They would have had decent armor. They would have had decent food or people to prepare it, but I should say most of us, even lower middle class Americans, had much, much greater luxury than the kings and chiefs of the ancient world. Indeed, what we take for granted they would consider magic and sorcery, but nonetheless, in contrast with us and in contrast with ancient legends that make his father great emperor, practically. The truth of the matter is, if there is any, that he would have been living an opulent life for those times, but renounced it. He felt that he had to leave that to seek out salvation, and that he went to study with two different gurus, one after the other, implying that he'd learned as much as he could from the one and on to the other, and then left him when he'd filled up. Or, as it says in the scriptures, that he couldn't buy what they had to say, thinking, this can't be it. It's interesting that one of those guys, his doctrine is not named, but it is described in a thumbnail sketch, and it sounds rather like Samkhya Hinduism. I know I didn't go into that either, but maybe I should just a little bit here. I've already given you some of the components, so I guess this isn't too much of a digression. Samkhya Hinduism, also based on the Upanishads, is the belief that though there are no gods, all souls are eternal, divine particles that once had omniscience, so they were all-knowing, but somehow they became mixed with matter. It was like a rain of these spiritual pearls that fell into a placid, muddy lake that latently contained the three gunas of matter, which began to differentiate and emerge because of the ricocheting impact of what they call the jiva. I wish we could call it an Atman. I think that's really what they mean, but they use the vocabulary slightly differently. And what happens is, well, you remember the business about the Atman, the battery, and the flashlight. Human suffering consciousness came about. Individualized consciousness, which is inevitably doomed to suffering, was the result of this illegitimate mixing of spirits or souls in matter. They always call them purushas, just like the primal man, same word. And they got mixed together. The result was forgetfulness of one's higher origin. The result was murkiness, amnesia, and the mistaken desire for the things of the world around one. And craving is what causes people to become reincarnated again. Their deeds, their moral actions will dictate what happens to them, provided they're incarnated again. But unlike in other forms of Hinduism, that is not what decides that you will be reincarnated. That only happens because you wanted to, foolishly. Another futile attempt at the merry-go-round. And if and when everybody does finally snap out of it and stop desiring, and through meditation learns the difference between the Purusha, the Atman, and the material soul of thoughts, feelings, etc., that are born of electrochemicals and endocrines and things, well, then the two are disengaged. There is no more suffering. There is mere witness until the end of the present life, and there is the restoration of immortality and divine bliss within the Purushas. This is pretty close to the doctrine that the Buddha is said to have studied and then to have rejected. But it's also pretty darn close to what they say he did go on to teach. So it's not as if, this makes this interesting. What's it doing there if it's not true? I mean, Thomas thinks, for instance, that this must be true, because who would, if they had the choice, otherwise, who would make up a story in which the supposedly enlightened one makes a couple of false efforts to find somebody to teach him? That's the same kind of anxiety the early Christians had when they tried to minimize the influence of John the Baptist upon Jesus. Gee, I don't like that. Why would the Son of God have needed any guidance from this unshaven bum? Same sort of thing. But I think Thomas is naive. Great scholar. But as a New Testament critic, I kind of sniff something here that I don't think he did. This is a bit of polemic saying, yeah, I know we're kind of like the Samkhya Hindus, but they fall short of the true depth of the Buddha's teaching. And he did know about that, but he rejected it. It's what Harold Bloom calls the anxiety of influence. The very reason to deny that the Buddha was influenced, going out of your way to deny that he repudiated his teaching, which he knew, is to just try to get people to stop noticing that, in fact, the Buddha's teaching is rather similar to it. They want to say, oh, no, it's new stuff. Nobody at the time knew about it anyway. Yeah, that's a ticket. So that's what's going on there. So say I. And but many take it as history, and that he did sample the mystical teaching. Then said, nah, I got to find something better than this. What does he do next? Well, he finds a group of ascetics, a brotherhood of mendicant monks who are big self-starvers, like the Jainists, who we have yet to dive into. They figured the thing to do is to starve sin out of the body. So let's be like Kafka's Hungerkünstler, the hunger artist. Let's be like St. Simeon Stylites and eat virtually nothing. And the Buddha the Bodhisattva hung around with these guys for a while, and finally said, what's the point? It is said that he was there, getting emaciated, and suddenly he heard somebody tuning a stringed instrument, and he thought, hey, now isn't that interesting? That is not going to sound good if it's tuned too loosely. But if the guy tunes it too tightly, it's going to be even worse. The thing to do is the middle path, to follow the middle path between excess. Yeah, that's it. I'm doing nobody any good by starving myself here. So he got up and left, and the others did not fail to notice and put him down on the prayer list as a backslider. I think you find a very similar insight to that in the New Testament epistle to the Colossians, which has this really good observation. What about all these people that are ascetics and deniers of the flesh, and they tell you, oh, you can't eat this, you can't eat that, and they've inflated themselves based on visions that have come out of their own heads. And he says, you see what's going on here? This is the work of the flesh, even though they think they're denying the flesh. It's the flesh in a more subtle sense, one that ought to be obvious to us here in Buddhism and Hinduism, right? There is that which thinks it is spirit when it is flesh. That is what we need to be saved from. And so what is it essentially? Holy mackerel, that guy didn't eat anything for 40 days. Well, it's just like der Hungerkünstler, Kafka's Hunger Artist. You ever read that? You should. You don't have to slog through it off Deutsch as I did back in junior high, but it's a great one anyway. This guy's a geek in a circus, and his thing is that he just doesn't eat, and he's emaciated, and he's in a cage with straw all over it, and he's so thin you have to look twice to see him against the straw. It's like a needle in a haystack. And finally, to keep him alive, they say, okay, it's time to eat something. No, he doesn't want to do it. He doesn't think he needs to do it, and it's going to sicken him to have to eat. Why the hell is he doing it? Well, it's like a gymnastic feat. How long can you stick it out without eating? Am I wrong, or does that sound like the self-exaltation of the flesh? Hey, look, I beat the old record! Yeah, that's what the Buddha concluded. So this has nothing to do with spirituality. It's just something to brag on, albeit perversely. To hell with it. So he left him. However, by this time he's getting pretty frustrated. He says, I am committed to seek salvation. I must know the answer to the misery that besets humanity. What is it? Well, I'm not giving up. And so he decides he will sit in the shade of the Bodhi tree, as we now call it, also for short, the Bo tree. But the Bodhi tree, I think supposedly it is a particular kind of tree, one huge one with overarching limbs. I don't remember the name. But we call it the Bodhi tree because, of course, it means the tree of enlightenment. And so he's sitting there and he says, I'm not leaving, no matter how long this takes. Well, according to different stories, it takes different times. I've read versions of it where he's there for months, but I think the most popular one has him gain illumination in that one evening. It doesn't really matter much. He does gain enlightenment and leaves, and the first people he finds are his old fellow ascetics. And with their attitude, right, they're not too happy to see him, right? Let's give this guy the cold shoulder. It's that backslider, Siddhartha. Hi, guys. Yeah, it's you. What you been doing? Looks like you put on a little weight. Well, he somehow gets them to listen to his first sermon, the Deer Park sermon, because they're staying in the Deer Park, the Deer Preserve, in Sarnath, a name that occurs in Lovecraft also. I don't know if you knew about the actual Sarnath, but with the sermon in the Deer Park of Sarnath, the Buddha set in motion the wheel of the Dharma, as they say. Might as well mention this one now. Dharma can mean an awful lot of things in Hinduism, in Buddhism, in Sanskrit generally. It means something, depending on how it's used in the context, the gospel message, so to speak, the truth, the doctrine, the party line we preach. It could mean the way of things, the reality. All those things are closely related. My message is preaching the truth, but then it's the message about the ultimate truth. So it could mean a lot of things like that in that continuum. And so he set in motion, he turned, he cranked up the wheel of the Dharma that would roll on to crush all opposition and create the Buddhist faith. And what do you know? Some of the old monks decided, he's right. Yeah, you can't argue with the truth. What the heck? And they become his first followers, and there are many more followers. He's got thousands of people following him, and he preaches for decades. And so he finally dies at a relatively advanced old age by accidental food poisoning. One of his hosts, he sees the monks coming and welcomes them, and gives the Buddha lunch, and supposedly it's bad figs. To his horror, it turns out he's poisoned the Buddha, and the Buddha's dying, and he summons the guy and says, look, it's all karma. You were just doing me a favor. That's all that counts for you, and I'm ready to shuffle off. No problem. And then there are other interesting stories about the reaction of the disciples, who, none of them were mad at the householder, but they figured, the Buddha's dying? Gee, here's my last chance to get in a couple of questions. What should we do about this? What should we do about that? And the Buddha just shook his head and said, be ye lamps unto yourselves. Now that's great, right? That is just perfect. It's so darn good it might be a legend. I've tried to restrict this to just what's supposed to be true, but if it ain't true, it ought to be, because the point of it is, did none of my teachings sink in? Are you a bunch of robots that have to just follow instructions? Aren't any of you enlightened? And if you are, doesn't that mean you can figure out a few things for yourselves? So it's not like I'm winding you up like a bunch of toy soldiers. You're supposedly becoming kindled with the same flame I bear. So he kind of laughed that off. Maybe he shouldn't have, though, because they would continue to meet in Congress and not quite be able to settle everything. But what a story. That much is supposedly true. Again, I wonder about it, and I'll just tell you briefly why. Already have, but just icing on the cake here. The same events are said to have happened to every one of the previous Buddhas. And all right, it's kind of a sham. You know what's coming, but they have to go through the same paces, the same stages. We will see how that has become a doctrine in Mahayana Buddhism. But then you wonder, it's kind of a strange reverse thing. You usually think of somebody doing something and then his imitators making it into a ritual to honor him. But if the usual Western view of Buddhism is true, what you have is somebody doing it, and then in reverse, we posit that there were people hundreds and thousands of years before who were in effect imitating the last guy in the series before he did it. Well, I admit that could be, right? They could have just said, what we have seen must have happened before. All right, that could be. But I just have to wonder if maybe we're not just picking the latest one in a series of myths and saying, okay, it happened this time. I don't know how you decide this. I don't see how it can be. I think it remains open that a couple of these genuine Buddhist scholars of the past were right and that there was no historical Buddha. But who knows? I sure don't. Now let's get into the real fun stuff. The life of the Buddha as magnified into legend, and boy, are these great. You might notice some similarities with the Gospels or with Father Abraham or the Prophet Zoroaster. That's okay. That's the law of biographical analogy. These same types of stories get told again and again. about analogous founder figures, saintly heroes, and so on, because the same, I guess, adoration takes the same forms. And yet each one is different. This is just great stuff, and all of them are very edifying and instructive. They're not simply fictions. They're instructive ones. Well, we have an Annunciation story, like we do with Jesus and Apollonius of Tyana and so on. The mother-to-be of Siddhartha, Queen Maya, did you say? Illusion? Yeah, that's right. That's what I said. Queen Maya has a dream denoting miraculous conception. She is, as she often did, drying off after a swim in a mountain lake surrounded by lotuses and such, and by her female attendants. And she's drying off, and suddenly there enters the scene a great white elephant. That's an old symbol of the gods in the East. It enters her side, and what does that mean? Well, I assume it means that the trunk touched her rib, and he vanished, and she felt something inside. Now, I don't want to make this into a cartoon, the way we watch these Bugs Bunny things. You'd think, well, she must be hugely distended because there's an elephant inside. No, they don't. It's not supposed to be comical because it's a divine being, right? And so the divine is inside her, though. So the outward symbol, the white elephant, disappears. And she wakes up, and what is this? What does this mean? And so she tells her husband, King Suddhodana, and who's a great emperor. And what does this mean? Because it turns out she is pregnant. And if you're on the inside, you know that it's not genetically the son of King Suddhodana, but it's a divine child. Though technically Queen Maya isn't a virgin. Raymond Brown would say, it's not parallel to the gospel and stuff. You look how parallel does it have to be? What does a woman have to be named Mary for it to be parallel? If so, this practically qualifies anyway. Maya is pretty close, but anyway. So the father and mother go to an oracle. Can you interpret this dream, Doc? And he tells them, well, yes, I can. This means that your son will grow up to be either a world ruler or a savior of the world, implying, the king thinks, that it's kind of up to them, but that's not what he means. So they go off and think about that, and that leads to the next story, the story of the passing sights. I love this, and I guess I should stop saying that, because otherwise I'll keep saying it. King Suddhodana says, look, I don't much care for world saviors and fanatics and dreamers, but it would be great. I mean, I got a pretty darn good kingdom already, but if I could see to it that my son would unify the world, or all India, whatever, under one banner, oh yeah, that's the thing to do. So he decides, I'm going to make sure he doesn't even know there's any other option but following in my footsteps. And so what he does is now keep in mind, this magnifies his wealth, almost beyond imagining. So he has these huge, gigantic palatial grounds with hunting preserves and anything you could want. And it's a little world unto itself. And as Prince Siddhartha grows and becomes a young man, he's never been off the palace grounds, and it's never occurred to him to go. What would there be to go to? I remember once I was in Bermuda and ran into this young teenager. He told me he had never been off the island of Bermuda. Bermuda's like 3 lousy miles long. There's one traffic light on the whole island. And yet, if one is going to be confined to one place one's whole life, Bermuda ain't bad. Now, that's the same sort of proposition here. So he's not missing anything. I mean, this is his world. I mean, heck, I wouldn't leave my house if I didn't have to, except to go and get a pizza most of the time. So, what's the idea? Well, everything's great in this little sphere. There's plenty of death and deprivation and disease and horror outside the world. Well, King Suddhodana doesn't want his boy even knowing about that, because what would happen if he did? Well, he might get in his head some crazy scheme like doing something about it, becoming the savior of the world. Oh, no. We don't want to do that. I mean, we do want him to go out there and start killing people eventually. We want him to be a conqueror, as the prophecy says. But by that time, it'll kind of be too late. He'll have learned the ways of the conquerors, and he won't see things like he wants to go out and be Gandhi or something. So let's keep him on the right course, train him in the arts of war and so forth. And love, he's married and has kids and so on. Everything's just great. And how are they going to maintain this illusion? Well, the king tells his servants, every day I want you to scour the palace grounds with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that the prince never sees anybody suffering or anything suffering. We don't want him to get ideas at this tender stage. Got it? Oh, yes, sir. You bet, Your Majesty. And so there, any fallen bird, any dead deer, any old guy they get rid of. And as old people get old, they're shuffled off somewhere else. And however, the gods decide, the king's not going to get away with this. The world needs the Buddha. The world wouldn't need him if we gods knew the answer, but we don't, or we would have revealed it long ago. So let's take a hand in this and help the prince see his true destiny. So one god goes down, and as the prince is being driven in his chariot around the grounds, this one god takes the form of a sick man, moaning, rolling over, puking in the ditch, turning green. Just as the prince's chariot comes up, and the prince says, "Whoa, hold on, stop right here. What is this? Who is this poor wretch?" And the charioteer says, "Oh, no. Why didn't they find this guy? Heads are going to roll now." And he says, "Well, Prince, I hate to tell you, but this guy is what we call sick." "Oh, what do you mean, sick?" "He's been taken care of by the best of doctors. He's never been sick in his life." "Well, sometimes if somebody eats something that didn't agree with him, or catch a cold or whatever, they just get sick like this for a while, and it's kind of rough. Hopefully he'll come out of it." "Oh, man, I didn't even know that was possible. Well, let's just go home, cut it short." Sure enough, the king hears about this, and he's giving him a lambasting. He says, "Look, this better not happen again. I don't want him knowing about this stuff." Well, the next day, you know what happens. He's out on another chariot ride. Another one of the gods comes down in human form. This time he's an old man on a cane, doddering along at slow speed, and suddenly the chariot, and he's right there in front of the chariot, and they have to slow down, hit the brakes while the old guy dodders along, and they go on, and Siddhartha says to him, "What did I just see there? What's the story with that guy? I bet you know, don't you?" "Yeah, Your Majesty, I guess I do. You see, this is what we call an old man. What, is he sick? Well, he's probably sick more often than he used to be, but that's just what happens to everybody when they get old. They kind of thin out, and stoop over, they're weak and slow, don't have a lot of energy." "No, you're kidding. This, what, is he the only one? How come you know so much about this? Is he famous?" No, this happens to everybody sooner or later. I hate to be the one to give you the news." "Oh, no." Back to the palace they go. Same thing, the tongue lashing from the king. Don't let this happen again. But it does happen again, because one of the gods on the third morning makes himself look like a stinking, festering, rotting, fly-infested corpse lying in the ditch, and sure enough, the ditch that they're going to pass, and they do, and then the Siddhartha says, hold the horses, what is this?" "Well, that's what we call a dead guy." Well, what do you mean? Well, the sick guy and the old guy, well, if you get sick enough or old enough, you wind up like this. Jeez, how often does this happen? Well, it happens to everybody. And then, of course, you start all over again, being reincarnated. Oh, my God. And so they go home, and now the jig is up. But he goes out the next day, and this time he sees a fourth deity who is dressed like a wandering monk. He's in good shape. He's not sick. He's not old. He's not infirm. But he's slowly treading the fields in meditation. And he's just wearing sackcloth, and his head is shaved, and the Buddha points to him and says, "Now, who's that? Well, what's going on here?" He's interested in this man. He says, "Well, that's a mendicant monk, sire. He has left the world behind to go seek salvation and the meaning of life." Ooh, he did, huh? And so he's quiet. And that night, the king is up late working, and he knows what's going to happen. Prince Siddhartha kisses his sleeping wife and kids goodbye, and passes the throne room, sees the lights are on, goes in and says, "Well, Dad, I have seen too much. I've got to leave and see what difference my life can make." And he said, "Look, I was afraid this day would come. I always hoped it would not. Is there anything I can offer you to get you to stay?" "Well, if you could promise me freedom from sickness, old age, and death." And he says, "My son, even though I'm king, I can't do that." And he said, I knew you couldn't, but here's one other possibility. Yeah, name it. "Can you assure me that once having died, I won't have to go through it all again?" "No, I can't do that either." And he says, "Yeah, that's what I thought. Well, so long." And he goes out with his charioteer in the dead of night. They go into the forest, and the Prince Siddhartha says, "Well, this looks like far enough." And he says, "Here, I want you to exchange clothes with me." And he gets a humble suit of clothes on and says, "Lend me your sword for a minute." And he uses it to shear off his hair. And he says, "You take the horse, you take the chariot, I don't need him anymore." And he launches off into the woods to become a mendicant monk. And that's where we pick up with what most folks think really happened, that he met with the two gurus and the group of monks and all of that stuff. Now, did all of this happen? Well, if you were determined to believe that it did, you could demythologize it a little bit and say, well, maybe it wasn't gods, maybe it actually was a sick guy, an old guy, and a dead guy. But how'd they get there then with this sort of surveillance system? And can you really imagine someone getting sheltered to that degree? Nah, let's face it, it doesn't really wash. Though what a great myth, what a great story, because, usually if you take myths literally, you're misled. You start to realize subtly that the very exaggerations are pointers back to the mundane facts. And you realize, I'm just like Prince Siddhartha. I may not be a wealthy son of an emperor, but he probably wasn't either. And yet every day I am passing people in the depths of despair and illness and so on. I don't care. Just make sure I don't step on them, or I don't wade into the pool of urine or blood they left behind. Tough luck, buddy. I'm like the priest and the Levite in the Good Samaritan parable. Well, it's a shame that there are these people like this, but what the heck, the poor you'll always have with you. And then on to the movie or the nice restaurant you go. What's it going to take before these things, these poor scarecrows, become visible to you? Like, how is it you're not seeing them and saying, good God, what about a world like this? Is there something I could do? That's what the story ought to be telling us, right? I mean, you're probably not going to become the savior of the world, but you might become a savior in your world, right? That could happen. And so what a story. What an amazing tale. There is a much more modest version in a Buddhist text where the Buddha simply tells, by way of a teaching, his bhikkhus, his monks, that, one day it occurred to me that in light of disease, that really cast a pall upon the enjoyment of health. It occurred to me that the knowledge of old age really freezes the petals off the flower of youth, and so on and so on. When I realized these things, I knew there was a job for me to do. I had to go out and try to find the answer to suffering. So there is this more modest version, though we don't really know if that's true either, right? Because that would be a way of simply anchoring this doctrine with the Buddha. There's always the anxiety in any religion to make sure that this idea you love so well goes back to the horse's mouth, so to speak. You want it to be a statement of the Buddha so everyone will heed it on authority. Not that the Buddha would like that, right? The Buddha is pictured like Socrates as wanting you to believe the truth for its own sake, no matter what labels on the bottle. Socrates said, think not of Socrates, think of the truth. And that's certainly the way the Buddha is depicted. So it's highly ironic that somebody would say, I better say the Buddha said this, or who's going to take it seriously? Rather, I would say somebody said this is a Buddha saying, because whoever said it was pretty darn enlightened. However it came about, whether the Buddha actually said that or not, we don't know, but boy, what a great part of the story that really does set up the mission of salvation, the nature of salvation in Buddhism. What is it we need to be saved from? You've got to set that up first. Wade Davis, anthropologist of religion operating over in the East, he said something that I think holds true of all religions. He said no matter what it is, Western, Eastern, ancient, modern, all religions have to oversimplify the problems of the human race and to create thereby a capital P problem. So once this is simplified, the preacher of it can say, all your problems at home and your financial worries and so on and so on, they're all related. They're all a syndrome, and I can tell you what to do to cure that problem at its root. And that will be, of course, the solution with a capital S. It may be a different problem. Well, it's going to be a different problem and a different solution with each religion. In Stoicism, it's ignorance that's the plight of the human race, and it's knowledge, living in accordance with nature by reason, that is the panacea. In Judaism, it's rebellion against the Creator, and the answer to that is repentance and embracing the law, the Torah of the Creator. In Christianity, it's the taint of original sin that comes genetically from Adam and Eve, and the solution is the atonement of Christ, which eradicates sin and so on and so on. Well, in Buddhism, it's craving, and that's where we're headed. There is a solution once we can determine what the problem is, and we need this story so that we can see it the way the Buddha supposedly did, or at least the way Buddhists do. It is suffering, and not necessarily extraordinary suffering, right? The point is underlined. What Gautama saw was a shock to him simply because he had never before seen the ordinary. There might not have been a reason to become a savior if these were the only three guys, right? If this was a single sufferer, the single old man, the single corpse. But this is going to happen to me too. Yeah, no one is exempt. Except, by the way, for my wife, who is exempt from old age. She, somewhere in her travels, found the fountain of youth, and she hasn't changed really so by so much as a wrinkle in the many years I've known her. What is that, 81 or 20? I've known her 27 years now. Same as the damn. And everybody else has this problem. Okay, so much for the legend. It doesn't add anything to the death of the Buddha. The death of the Buddha with the poisoning could possibly be just part of a legend. Who knows? But we don't really have any alternatives, so what difference does it make? Now, this next section I get from Houston Smith's summary of Buddhism and the historical Buddha in his book, The Religions of Man. And I like the way he puts this. As far as I know, no Buddhist text distills it this way, but this distillation sure does preserve the essence of a lot of Buddhist stories. So I think this is pretty good. There's 6 aspects of contemporary Hinduism that the Buddha repudiated, and then we can say what he put in its place. Did the Buddha himself say these things? Again, it's difficult to say, but this is how he was pictured, at least as the repository of early Buddhist teaching. Well, the first of these 6 differences is no authority. Vedic Hinduism was a religion of authority. There were scriptures that only the priests could read and understand, and there were rituals that had to be done that only they could do. How did you know these rituals would work? Like that hymn we read the other day, the sacrifice that you encompass on all sides, O Agni, only that one goes to the gods. How do you know? Well, you just have to take it on faith. The authorities say so. Well, the Buddha rejected that. Instead, he proposed experimental or experiential religion, something you can experience, and that anyone can. It is not the preserve of some clerical elite. No, it's open to anybody. Secondly, no speculation. That is, the proper business of religion is more existential. It isn't a matter of spinning your wheels over idle speculations. Hey, Tom, you ever ask yourself how many angels can dance on the point of a pin? Well, yeah, I have. And in fact, I've been doing some research about that, and here's what I feel. Get out of here. Even if you could know such a thing, would that make any difference? Well, no. Somebody asked the Buddha, what happens to the soul when you die? And he says, well, what happens to a flame when you snuff it out? Where does it go? Does it go to the north, the east, the west, the south? I'm not sure what you mean. And he said, yeah, I didn't think so. I'm not sure what you mean. And he says, this is one of many questions that just tend not unto edification. They're just not helpful questions. It might be interesting to know, but that's trivial in itself. It's just like some, who played so-and-so on some sitcom 30 years ago. Do you really need to know this? And in fact, these questions are distractions from the proper business of salvation, especially insofar as they deal with religion. Right? It's real easy to think you're discussing important stuff there, when all the while you're just using it as an excuse for temporizing and delaying what you have to do to change yourself. Oh man, here's another great parable. The parable of the arrow. Man, this is just top-notch, no pun intended. Okay, this guy's walking across a meadow, and suddenly, wham! He's hit with an arrow. Down to the ground he goes. His friends see this happen and run across the field and gather around him and say, now, hold on, I'm going to pull out that arrow. Brace yourself. Suppose that was you. Would you say to your friends, now hold on, nobody touched that arrow till we get a few things straight here. Can you tell me what sort of wood the arrow shaft is made of? And the head, can you tell from the shape of the wound if it's chipped stone or it's molded metal? Can you tell if there was any poison on it, and if so, what kind? Did anybody happen to catch the direction from which this guy shot me? And if so, if you saw him, could you tell what caste he belonged to? And the Buddha said, this guy, if he persists, if he insists on knowing these answers, is not going to live long enough to learn the answer. No, and the only thing that ought to be on his mind is, get that arrow the hell out right now! Right, that would be the only question he would want to know. How about you? What is your concern with religion? Are you just interested in the caste system and all the different gods? Forget that. That has never helped anybody toward real salvation, toward curing what's ailing you. It just doesn't matter. I mean, it's not that there are even answers to such questions like that. Do you really need to know? Because I tell you what you do need. You need deliverance from suffering. Now that there is an answer to. Are you willing to try it? And that's just the greatest. No supernaturalism is our third fundamental difference with contemporary religion. That means, like, no miracles. Right? It's not some rationalistic denial of the possibility of miracles. And even as a New Testament critic, I don't deny that miracles could have occurred. How the heck would I know, a puny mortal, about natural law and what can be done? I have no idea. How could anyone ever know such a thing? But the point here is that let's assume there are miracles. Who cares in the long run? I love this story about the Buddha. He's, as I said a moment ago, leading hundreds of people in an itinerant monastic existence, one resting place to another, and so the Ananda's kind of scouting out the territory ahead, the right-hand man of the Buddha. And Ananda is there talking with an old hermit who lives at the riverbank, and when the Buddha walks up, and he says to him, "Oh, Master, this fellow has lived here for a long time and meditated, and he's gained the ability to walk across the river on the surface of the water. Isn't that amazing?" Or as the church lady would say, "Isn't that special?" And so the Buddha says, you can just walk across the surface of water, can you? "Oh, yeah, yes, Master, I can do that." And so how long did it take you to master that skill? "Oh, it took 40 years. And the Buddha said, "Boy, that's too bad, because I happen to know that right around the bend there's a guy with a ferry boat that would have taken you across for a quarter." Suppose you can leap tall buildings in a single bound. Does it matter? Does it matter in terms of the only thing that does, namely salvation? Guess not. There, of course, are stories to fill this vacuum in which the Buddha does miracles. But that's just part of the window dressing. That's just, again, the law of biographical analogy. It's a narrative version of a stained glass window. You're just symbolically calling attention to the pivotal greatness of this founder. It's like putting a halo over his head. The fourth main difference between the Buddha, or at any rate early Buddhism, and contemporary Vedic Hinduism was no ritual. Whoa, them's fighting words. The Vedic religion is all about rituals. As Jaimini finally concluded, you don't really need any gods, but you do need those rituals. The Buddha says that if you need a favor from the gods, maybe the Brahmin priest can get it for you. I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm just saying it has nothing to do with salvation. You sacrifice a bunch of animals to get a victory in war the next day. Suppose you get it. Yippee. You offer a sacrifice to the gods to get more cattle or better yield of crops, and you get it. You sacrifice to the gods to get a clear day for your office picnic, and they grant it. Yippee. What does this have to do with the prevalence of suffering in your life and everybody's life? I just don't see it. Why are you wasting time on this kind of nonsense? It might work. I'm not saying it doesn't. It's not exactly superstition, it's just superfluous. This is a fascinating way of looking at religion. This sort of explains and fits in with the myth that we saw before, where the gods have to come down and get the Buddha working. Let's get him busy at this thing so he can tell the human race how to be saved, because we can't tell him. We don't know. You know, the gods can't do that. They need to be saved themselves. Man, oh man, what an idea. Well, this feeds right into the fifth one, no gods. Sometimes we read that the Buddha was an agnostic or an atheist. That would be mighty interesting, but I don't believe there's any real evidence for that. Again, I don't even know if the Buddha existed, but at least among these sayings attributed to him, you get the impression that he didn't challenge that the gods existed. They just were not important. Don't know how to be saved, need to be saved, but can't tell you how. I mean, why do they need to be saved? Well, they will pass away as well. And what about their next incarnation? They too need liberation, but they don't ever really realize it because things are so good for them. It's going to come to an end, but it's easy to forget that while things are going well, and that's what they do. So they rejoice to have the Buddha, a human being, close enough to the suffering that comes from a shifting, changing existence to see it and realize the need to stop it before it was too late. So they look to him. So you don't need any gods. Believe in them or not, who cares? I mean, if something matters to you and you want to get a favor from it, it doesn't matter. But that's just not what religion is all about. This is why Buddhism could effortlessly penetrate new cultures. They didn't have to tell people, stop worshiping your gods. Worship them if you want to, but get straight what it is that will save you. It's not that. And it's like if you want to play sports on Saturday or Sunday, who cares? It's not bad. It's just not that important. There's no reason you shouldn't do it. But it's just a question of what are you giving your life for? Want to watch TV? Way to relax after a busy day? That's innocent enough. It's just not important. That doesn't condemn it. Well, here they're saying traditional religion and gods and rituals. There's nothing really wrong with them, just not important. Okay. Then 6, no grace, or the flip side, no fatalism. That is, there is no belief that you have come to the end of your rope and you're helpless. If you gave up in despair, that would be fatalism. If you said, well, maybe there is divine help for me beyond my failure, that would be a belief in grace. But neither one is justified, the Buddha says, because no amount of bad karma can prevent you from being saved. You don't have to despair. There's no reason for fatalism. You are not and cannot be too far gone. And, by the same token, you don't need anybody to save you despite yourself, and it wouldn't work anyway because of what salvation is. You have to do it. You got to do it now. Now, what is salvation? We're getting very close to that, but let's just say for the moment that it is a state of mind and outlook. At least it involves no more craving for worldly, temporal goods. At least it involves denying the ego. Let's just put those cards on the table. Well, I'm afraid I can't do those things for you. You can't do them for me. It's like losing weight. I need to lose weight. I wish somebody could come up with some way of them losing it for me. But that's not going to happen, right? Because of the nature of the game, I got to do the losing. Well, in the same way, I got to clear my head. You can't do it. You can clear your own. That might inspire me to clear mine, but you can't rearrange the contents of my skull. Only I can do it. Hence, but I can do it. There is a way to banish those shadows, and that is the Buddha's Dharma. And so, no grace, no fatalism. I think Smith does a real good job of that. In fact, you almost wish the old Buddhists had put it that way, because they loved making lists and numerical patterns. I like that 6 repudiations. If I ever start my own Buddhist sect, perhaps I will have the 6 great repudiations. But that's not likely to happen, I guess. Okay, let's take a look at the Dharma, the doctrine, the gospel. According to whom? The Buddha? Well, ostensibly, but then he's said to have said darn near everything in the scriptures. Once I was out at the Jesus Seminar, you see, and we had big-time religion scholar Karen Armstrong there, ex-nun, and she was just glowing with enthusiasm for the Buddha, and she'd written a book, allegedly sort of a biography of the Buddha, and she was just spouting all these great stories, some of the ones I've mentioned here, and I love the stuff too, obviously. But I asked her during the question period, did it matter to her whether the Buddha historically said these things or did these things, or did she even mean that? Is she just saying it's a literary matter? Oh yeah, the Buddha said this, as I might say Hamlet said this. Let me quote King Oedipus or something. I don't mean I have a transcript of what they may have said, not assuming they existed, but that's the attribution in the text. So I said, is that what you're doing? Or are you doing with the Buddha what we're all trying to do here with Jesus, coming up with the original thing? Oh no, it was the former. She didn't give a hoot whether the Buddha actually said it. And you see, it's that kind of thinking that leads critics to wonder, was there ever a Buddha? Was it always just a handy hook to hang teachings from? Well, who knows, and I say who cares? The stuff is good in its own right. But who did say this Dharma? Either the Buddha or the first Buddhists, but the formulation of it I'm about to give you comes from the minority Buddhist sect, the Theravada Buddhists. Or you could call them the Theravadins, whatever you prefer. But according to Theravada Buddhism, we're going to look at the 3 marks of existence. I'm not sure other Buddhists put it this way. They change quite a lot when you get to other types of Buddhism, but let's stick with this. What does Theravada mean, by the way? It means the way of the elders. Who are we talking about here? This is Southern Asian Buddhism. You would find it, you do find it in India, though not a whole lot. There's not a great amount of Buddhists there anymore. You'd find it in Sri Lanka, what used to be called Ceylon. You'd find it, I guess, in Malaysia. You'd find it in Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Burma, Thailand, and mainly there. The other type of Buddhism is found up north, so these southern parts of Asia would embrace this. Way of the elders, well, that's obviously a claim to have the old-time religion. Now, their rivals would dispute that, and it is clear that, like Christmas Humphreys, an Englishman who, what a name, right, especially since he became a Buddhist, he became a theosophist and then a Buddhist, an unbelievably learned man, great books. He did the introduction to Buddhism that Penguin Books still has in print, and a lot more has been learned about Buddhism since then, but you still ought to read that book. It's great stuff. Even better, perhaps, is that by Edward Conz, C-O-N-Z, a German scholar who claimed he himself was a bodhisattva sent to Earth to help the West understand Buddhism. Once he said with the wonderful arrogance of the German professor that only insiders knew the truth of so-and-so, and some student challenged him and said, well, how do you know? And he said, if I am not an insider, no one is. And see, that's probably true. There is an element of divine arbitrariness in some people close to the divine. They become thinning veils between this order and that, whatever you make of that, so that the lightning and thunder of Sinai are visible and audible in them. Sometimes there's a great novel about Buddhism by, many of them, by Talbot and Mundy, wrote in the teens and 20s of the 20th century. And one of them called Old Ugly Face deals with this guy that appears to be a corrupt, big-mouthed, tyrannical Buddhist abbot. But as the story goes on, you realize, no, this is the voice of the divine among men, and his irritability is really the ferocity of the divine terror that bids Moses throw aside his shoes, for he stands on holy ground. Fascinating. A friend of mine once told me he was down in Princeton or someplace hearing Hans Kung speak, and Kung went into the bookstore and was furious that they had none of his books on hand. And why don't you have these books? And my friend said he was a little taken aback and disappointed in the great Kung. I said, no, you should have been disappointed if he'd have not been upset. This is the divine wrath. It's like Professor Kingsfield on the paper chase. It's like Chef Ramsay on Hell's Kitchen. You'd expect to be able. Anyhow, how do I get into that? The Christmas Humphreys speaks of those Buddhists that point out that Theravadins are not so old. They have considerably abstracted and systematized and developed the Buddhist Dharma, just like Mahayana Buddhists. Well, that is true. That's certainly true. This doesn't seem to be just raw Buddhism as it left the mouth of the first teacher. But it's hard to deny that Mahayana Buddhism, which we're going to get to probably next time, is much, much more elaborated. The differences between it and the more humble, the simpler Theravada Buddhism are enough to make the two count, if they were Western faiths, as two different religions. We'll get into that. So these people seem to have gone a lot. The apple has fallen a lot closer to the tree in this case. But one sign of the advancement of Theravada is that it has these nice systems and numbered lists. Who are the other guys? I've already called them the Mahayana Buddhists. They have a name, kind of an insulting name for these guys, the Theravadins. They call them the Hinayana Buddhists. Maha, great, Hina, small. We'll see the difference there, but at any rate, for the moment, to explain really the difference, I have to explain something about Mahayana Buddhism, which I will do in due course, but for the moment, just remember that the Theravada Buddhists are called by their rivals the Hinayana Buddhists, which means the followers of the lesser way. But the three marks of existence, according to Theravada. The first is anicca, in English, A-N-I-C-C-A, impermanence. A-N-I-C-C-A, impermanence. Later on, called Kshanika, K-S-H-A-N-I-K-A, which means flux. Very much like what Heraclitus said. In fact, if you know that helps here. The pre-Socratic Heraclitus. The point is that nothing is unchanging or permanent, which kind of means there is nothing. A thing would be some chunk of permanence. But no. Nothing is permanent, therefore nothing is no thing. Once people realize that's the implication, they start making insights like saying, well, really, come to think of it, since everything is changing, nothing has an abiding shape. Nothing has a substantial being. There is no law to the being of any individual thing. There is no dharma to the being, no necessary definition. It is all, hence, Maya, illusion. Nothing has any dharmas, as they say. Here's another word for it. There is no truth about anything. There is no unchanging definition or list of characteristics. What can you name that is impervious to change? Once you find out that there are seashell fossils atop Mount Everest, you realize, well, I guess maybe everything does change. You certainly change. I mean, you're not going to notice it standing in front of a mirror for a long time, but you're going to change. Some of it's voluntary, some of it's involuntary. I know a guy that used to legally change his name, did it at least 2 or 3 times that I know of, to fit in with different groups he lived among. What on earth, in his case, had not changed? He was protean man, changing at the drop of a hat. So everything is changing. Second, there is anatta, the no soul or no self doctrine. That's just the doctrine of anicca applied to you. Right? It is saying that the ego self, this seeming self you have that shows up in the mirror, that shows up on the Minnesota multiphasic personality inventory, etc., it's not permanent or unchanging either. It is conditioned by what happens to it. It is changed. It is altered. Whether it goes down or up, whether you become a creep or more noble, it is not permanent. That's the point here. And so it is no real self. It's not an Atman. Now you might say, well, I know that. I remember from the last couple of sessions here that the Atman is unconditioned. It's not the experienced self. Yes, but according to Buddhism, there also is no Atman underneath it. Not only is what you think of yourself think of as yourself, not the Atman, but there also isn't an Atman. Boy, this opens up a weird revolving door. Here's where I first see how Buddhism is not metaphysical. Buddhism repudiates any notion that it is describing unseen reality. And there is a huge difference between Buddhism and Hinduism. The more we get into this, the more we're inevitably going to think of Shankara and Vedanta and all that stuff, where they talk about being is one and it is divine. In Buddhism, you don't exactly talk about that, or at least you don't want to. I think they do wind up with metaphysics, but they really shouldn't. They really try not to, because they're always talking about experience. To say that all is void is not necessarily to characterize reality, but to characterize experience, which is devoid of certain realities. But there is no self. That doesn't mean you're not experiencing. Well, of course not. I mean, all these Hindus have said that pain and suffering and everything else are experienced by this false material self. And the Buddhists say, well, yes, that's right. But if you could get rid of that, there would be an increase in bliss in the universe. You might not have a name to put on it. You might not be around as an individual to cheer when it happened, but that would only mean the scales again would have fallen from your eyes. Now, did the Buddha say that there was no soul, no self? Here's where there's a stray piece of evidence where it indicates maybe that the Buddha was remembered somewhere as teaching that there is an eternal, abiding Atman beneath the ego self, as Shankara would much later teach. and that the Buddhists later inferred that there was no Atman at all. Now, I guess what I'm saying is that the Buddha would say, you'd say you have a self. Well, I say that is really the 5 component parts, the aggregates, or the skandhas in Sanskrit. That's what you're talking about. That isn't really a self. And from that, the theory goes that some Buddhists may have inferred, he's saying there isn't any self at all. That's the no-self doctrine, the no-soul doctrine, but you can't rule out that all he meant was you're barking up the wrong tree, that your Atman is something else, not so easily describable, like Hindus would eventually say. So we don't know, but at least the way Buddhism did get systematized, they went with the interpretation that there's no soul, just the aggregates. My wife gave me this great birthday card that is just a terrific illustration of this. I wish you could see it. In it, she's got on one page, happy birthday, and then on the facing page, she's got all kinds of neat stuff that is neat to me. There's a picture of her and me and our daughters. Then there's pictures of the logos for a couple of my favorite eating joints. Then there's a picture of the Beatles. Then there's Rudolf Bultmann and a portrait of Paul Tillich, and next to him there's H.P. Lovecraft. And then there's the Universal monsters, Dracula, the Bride of Frankenstein, etc. Then there's a logo for Battlestar Galactica, a picture of Cthulhu, photos of a sausage biscuit and a pizza pie, a can of Diet Coke, picture of Batman, a Superman action figure. I'm a great collector of these toys, as you probably know by now. I said, now that's Buddhism, because that's me. It's not a picture of me, because in a sense there isn't any me. It's just a kind of random collection of all these items that are just rattling around in a big bag called me. So that's the no-self doctrine, and it's fine by me. Well, this raises a bit of question. Don't Buddhists believe in reincarnation? Well, yeah, they do, but what exactly reincarnates? Later Buddhists are going to have other answers to this, but the earliest and simplest answer I know of from Buddhism, what I think is the Theravada answer, is that, well, your Atman does not reincarnate because there isn't one. It's relatively easy for Hindus to explain what is reincarnated because they do have this Atman, this true self, and they say it's like a banana in the fist of a monkey swinging from one tree to another through the jungle. The banana isn't really even aware of what's happening, but it's being carried along from one place to another. Your Atman is oblivious to what is happening in your mortal existence. You're aware of things only because you have it in there, like the battery and the flashlight illuminating experience. But it's not experiencing anything. It's not suffering. It's not rejoicing. It's just there, and like an oblivious power cell. Well, the Buddhists would say the monkey's not carrying any banana. Well, what is it doing the swinging? It's really just your skandhas, your aggregates, and what are they? Well, I've seen these things translated differently, so you could almost fill in the blanks, but think of all the different ways in which you are subjective. There are the emotions, the desires, the thoughts, the perceptions of the senses, the instincts, there's the physical body, though it changes. I've already, I think, named 6. It's almost irrelevant how many there are, because, again, there's slippage depending on how you translate, but you get the idea. Or if you don't, here's another great Buddhist story from the Questions of King Menander. This, one of the Hellenistic successors of Alexander the Great, had a Buddhist monk in to explain the Dharma to him. And he says, okay, no soul, no self. And he says, what are you talking about, no self? You're crazy. He says, I think I can demonstrate it to you, master. And so he says, let's go look at your chariot. And so they get the nice royal chariot out, and he says, show me, if you will, your majesty, what is the chariot? Is it this? And he kicks the wheel of it. No, that's just the wheel. How about this? And he moves a little bit and touches the axle. Nah, that's just the axle. That's not the to be identified with the chariot. Well, how about this nice-looking piece? And then he touches the cab with a throne in it there in the place of the chariot here. No, it's just my private part of it. It's not the chariot. Well, how about this? And he touches the horses and the reins and everything he points to. The king rightly says, no, that's not the chariot. They exhaust the whole list of pieces of the thing, and the monk says, I am sorry, but I can find no chariot here. Well, yeah, the chariot's sort of a collective name for the whole thing. Kind of seems like there's more to the whole than the sum of the parts, but maybe there isn't. Maybe it's just that you're seeing them work together, producing motion. There's no special something except the arrangement, and that's not a thing. Maybe arranged differently. Somebody may say, if we move that axle, that would change the center of gravity, and have the horses do this instead of that. Yeah. Well, that's the kind of change your components undergo. Now, the body, obviously, is not factored directly back into the mix. You don't return in the same body, though it is possible. Eventually, you might have a body made of some of the same chemicals. It doesn't really matter. The really important thing is the other skand is the inclinations, the instincts, the personality traits, etc. They are going, albeit in a changing form, to be present in your next incarnation. You're not going to remember it, but that hardly means anything. You might say, wait a minute, Bob, how can it be me if I'm not even remembering it? Well, look, I'm 54 years old. I have a hard time remembering what I did yesterday, much less for whole decades of my life, right? You look back, well, I went to high school, you know what I did there. I was in college for all these years. I don't know, can't think of what I was doing day to day there. I mean, I'm already forgetting this life, right? So what is the surprise if I get into another one and can't remember this one, right? That's just no problem, right? So they say, yeah, it keeps on going. And what keeps on going? I mean, it's changing. Well, think of a wave motion in water. The wave is going, even though it's different water that you seem to see. I mean, doesn't it kind of look to you, you're looking out at the ocean, that this wave of water is coming closer to the shore? Well, the wave is, but the water's not. What is slapping the shore isn't what you saw, hundreds of yards out to sea. The wave motion is the same, though. They also speak of it like you light a candle, and then you hold up that candle and light the wick of the next one, and hold up that one to light the wick of the next one. You don't identify the candles, but the one did kindle the other. The one led to the other, but it's a continuous process that is always changing. How about this one? How about Grandpa's axe? Go out into the barn, son, and get Grandpa's axe. I'll show you a picture of it in the family scrapbook. So Junior goes out and gets it, and he says, Grandpa, this can't be the axe of one of our ancestors. It doesn't even have the same shape handle. The head's different. I can't see the one in the picture is much wider. And this has got this chip in it. And he says, we had to replace the head back in '02, and we had to replace the shaft a couple of times after it got broken over the edge of a car. Huh? You mean you've replaced all the parts of this more than once, and it's still Grandpa's axe? Well, yeah, it is. Meaningfully, that's the meaning of the thing. Like my favorite pizza joint. When I would go to New Jersey, I go to Mr. Dino's and have a pie. Well, I used to go to Mr. Dino's across the street and down the block. Does it count as the same place? All the same guys are making the same magic pies there, so I guess it does, but it's not the place I used to sit reading the Death of God theology, napkin in hand, so I didn't wind up with orange pages, which I did anyway. I mean, is it the same? Well, yes and no, and that's what Heraclitus said. That's what process philosophers say today. There aren't really any static things. Everything is always changing, and at most you can point to a channel of change. You can't step into the same river twice. When you put your foot right back down, different waters have replaced the ones that were there a moment ago. So there are the skandhas, the parts that are ever changing and being replaced until none of it's... Oh, how about the most elementary fact of all? Every 7 years or so, the cells of your own body are all replaced. Not all at the same time, unless you go to a Star Trek transporter beam or something. But is it still you? Oh, yeah, and no. Oh, man. You don't have to get into the bowels of some speculative system to get confused like this. These are all everyday observations that indicate that maybe it isn't so simple, even what you see around every day. That's what raises philosophical questions. Because the answers sure as hell aren't apparent. Well, how about the third great mark of existence? Wait a minute, haven't I had three already? No. The first one was anika, or impermanence. The second was anatta, no self or no soul. Skandhas are not a separate mark of existence. That's just explaining what it is that is changing and transforming as you go from life to life. The third mark of existence is dukkha, D-U-K-K-H-A, D-U-K-K-H-A, suffering. All life is suffering. No wonder. I like the way Schopenhauer, was much influenced by Buddhism at this point, put it. He said, step back and take a look at your life. Isn't it a constant pendulum swing between frustration and disappointment? Whatever it is, a house, a relationship, a job, a car, whatever it is, you're saying, oh man, I can't wait till I get so-and-so. If only I could get so-and-so, then everything would be great. And then you get so-and-so. And forget the monkey's paw and all that kind of thing. Let's say it doesn't backfire. It is what you wanted. But then that hurdle's jumped. You start taking it for granted, and you start looking around for something else. I mean, that's it? That's all there is to it? Well, I'm going on to the next thing. And when you get it, the same thing's going to happen, don't you see? And somehow we do not see, unless we get the Buddhist enlightenment. Right? Desire, to get ahead of the game, is the cause of suffering, because we can never gain lasting satisfaction. That is a redundancy, right? If you were satisfied, it would last. If it doesn't last, you're not satisfied. If you, like Jesus says, I will give you water that will well up to eternal life. Whoever drinks this water will be thirsty again, but not the water I give them to drink. Yeah, that's the idea here. But we're always frustrated, then disappointed, then frustrated again, then disappointed again, back and forth. Now, why should it be that way? Isn't that a particularly cruel way to design it? Yeah, that's exactly right. Who did design it? Oh, a little guy named Mara. Mara the tempter, the Buddhist Satan, the god of this world, or one might say the godfather of this world. He's got this great racket going. He's got all these addicts to the material world. The poor buffoons, the poor fools don't seem to realize they're barking up the wrong tree, trying to get satisfaction in a way that will never work. Right? They're always on that merry-go-round, getting nowhere, which is just where a merry-go-round takes you, reaching for that ring, which is always going to be outside of your grasp. Mara wants you that way, because that way you'll be a repeat customer. He wants you to drive that car into the ground and go pick up another jalopy with planned obsolescence and so on. How's he going to stay in business otherwise? Why should it be that way? Well, because of impermanence. How could you gain lasting satisfaction in a world where nothing is lasting? You couldn't snatch anything, you couldn't grasp onto anything and keep it forever. What happens to Dr. Faustus when he stops the whirl of images that Mephistopheles is showing him and says, hold on a moment, stay a while, you are so beautiful. He says it's not so much to a person as to a moment. Ooh, can't do that. No, because the whole thing is a hurtling, speeding, moving series. It's not a thing, it's not a block of ice, or even if it were, it melts. Right? So naturally, if that's where you're looking for suffering, looking for satisfaction, what you're really looking for is suffering. If you're a glutton for punishment, that's all you're going to get in this world. When are you going to snap out of it and realize there's got to be some alternative? That's what the Buddha realized beneath the Bodhi tree. Of course, there is an alternative to this, right? You could look at it the way Hesse's Siddhartha did and say, if the nature of things is change, all right, I won't kick against the goads. I'll accept that and just gratefully witness the changes. If I am ultimately gone, that's all right. So maybe you don't have to. I mean, the Buddha is saying you got to find stability and permanence where you can. Nirvana. Don't look for it where you can't find it. But one could take the other Siddhartha's approach and say, well, maybe the permanent is not what I need. Maybe that's my error. Why should I seek release from this kaleidoscope of wonders? Sure, none of them last very long. I don't either. That's all right. What's the problem? Well, much later, a very sharp Buddhist thinker, Nagarjuna, is going to combine those two insights into the great dialectic of Nagarjuna. Isn't Buddhism fun? Well, I mentioned nirvana. What is that? Well, the word in Sanskrit it's nirvana, and in English Nirvana. In Pali it's nibbana, Nibbana. I have no particular preference except that I feel a little silly saying nibbana. It seems like it ought to be a snack cracker or something. But nirvana is just a plain old word originally. It just means the extinction, as in the blowing out of a flame. The flame, in this case, of desire and of pain, which is a consuming fire. And yet, like the bush of Moses on Mount Horeb, it burns but does not burn up. So your only option is to put it out. No more maddening desire, no more racking pain and regret and remorse and frustration, etc. Well, wait a minute. That doesn't sound very good. I mean, I guess I'd rather be alive with a headache than just dead. Well, that's not what you're talking about here. This is just like apophatic theology in the Eastern churches. What in the West is called the via negativa, the negative way, or better, the way of negating. These theologians, I guess the greatest of them being the pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite, that guy named for the philosopher Paul meets in Acts 17, actually a later character, pseudo-Dionysius. He talks about this great void of unknowing and so forth. He and all these guys say, don't you think that God must be so surpassingly great that no human words could serve to describe him? I mean, any time you thought you were describing God, wouldn't you really be making an idol? Wouldn't it really be in your own image? God is so great that, just like in the Upanishads, neti is all you can say. No, he's not this, he's not that, he's not even like this, not even like that. Aquinas understood some of that. He said we can't just describe God. It shouldn't be any surprise that a just God lets certain injustices pass, because God is an infinite entity. God could not quite play by the rules we would. I mean, he's an infinite being. How can you squeeze him down into those categories? Yeah, these guys say, that's right. Aquinas said you could speak by analogy of God and say, well, God's kind of this way when he relates to us. Doesn't exactly love us, but whatever's going on is analogous to love, and that's good enough. Well, the Eastern theologians said, no, you can't really do that. You can't positively give any information about God, but you can get closer to the truth by negating false concepts of God. If you think God is just a big Santa Claus or some terrible disciplinarian, those are inadequate versions of God. Whether you like them or you fear them, that isn't God. So all you can do is to say that is a God, and you're closer to home base. Right? You can at least get less ignorant about God. You can at least flush away false concepts of God, even if that means any concepts of God. And I think it does. Now, that's kind of the idea of nirvana. They don't use it for God because they don't believe in an overarching God. But it's structurally very much the same idea. You're saying, now, I know what this world is like. It's the world of samsara. We had that with Hinduism, too, the same thing. The world in which one is reincarnated. The world of repetition and yearning and craving and suffering. Yeah, we know too well what that is like. We've got plenty of words to describe that. But suppose I want to describe nirvana, from which all these things are absent. Well, I am out of luck there, because what words could I use? I mean, every word we have is predicated on comparison with something in this life. How can any of them even come close to referring to that which is just practically the opposite? I mean, what are you going to say? Again, neti, not this, not that. So what is it? Well, you don't really need to know what it is. Isn't it enough to know what it's not? No more pain and suffering. No more desire. I mean, that's not just getting a ticket to heaven where everything's going to be hunky-dory. No more desire. You'll be past the selfish illusion of the ego as well as the problems it occasions. There's no selfish thing here, no promise of goodies all the time. That would be childish. That would be catering to the ego instead of saving you from it. But nirvana is at least not oblivion. They say we can't describe it. It would be an idol if we thought we could. But at least it can't be simple oblivion any more than it would make sense for it to be personal survival of an individual. You showing up in nirvana, well, that's not going to happen. Nor do you need to die to enter into this state of consciousness. Well, probably it's only going to be intermittent until you do shuffle off this mortal coil, never to be reincarnated again. It's like, suppose you had a tadpole talking to its dad who's a frog and says, Dad, I just can't wait to get out of the water here. It's the only thing I know. I just must be exciting to be hopping around out there on dry land. Can you tell me something about it? And Papa Frog says, gee, I wish I could, but there's just nothing I can say that would convey it. There's no common ground. You don't know any words that would refer to that. And if I used words that would, there'd be no match to your vocabulary. You'd never know what I'm talking about. Which is why in prophetic, charismatic churches people speak in tongues. It's a way of saying we are speaking of the secrets of the Spirit, which means ipso facto mere mortals can't understand them. You may not want to do that, but you should understand the profound symbolism of it. And in the same way here, it's no cheap escape to say we can't describe nirvana. You sure can't describe. It's like can you describe the surface of the sun to me based on ideas and images from visiting Antarctica? Well, I guess I can't. And that's all we've got to deal with. So it's not individual salvation, like going to Disneyland, but it's not oblivion, which some people are afraid of here. That's not what's going on here. All we can say is what it will be happily without pain and suffering and the desire that leads to them. I believe I will wait till next time to discuss the Four Noble Truths, and I would hate to do that if I hadn't already anticipated what the capital S solution is.